Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you? We're going to assume fine because we can't see you. So I don't know why I asked you that. It was a weird conversation to start with. Good morning. Dr. Mary, what did we do last week that was kind of interesting?
We started our training to be hope counselors with a D. So.
Okay, so we're working
I didn't
with.
know how much detail you wanted.
We're working with a group called IGNTD Recovery out of Los Angeles by a man named Dr. Adi Jaffee, who we met last September when we were visiting our son Quinn. We had connected with Adi. We've talked a little bit about him on LinkedIn because he has a monthly group that we started going to last August. And then we ended up having lunch with Adi and a former guest of ours, Alex Kaplan, who we also met for the first time that day. So you want to talk a little bit about this mindset of IGNTD and what makes it different?
It's interesting. It's completely different from AA, and it's completely foreign to the way I learned to be sober, because it's based on how the individual feels comfortable about how much they reduce their drinking and over what period they do it. And sometimes it's not even back all the way down to abstinence. It's what you can live with for a better life. And it's a very interesting way of doing it. I think it's incredibly successful too. I mean, the more I've learned about it, the more I think this is a fantastic way of controlling your alcohol consumption or your addiction to anything.
So if I am remembering correctly, I think our guest, Lana Whiting, was the first person I had ever talked to who said, I don't call myself an alcoholic. I don't like the shame attached to that. I did not go through a 12-step program. She went through Annie Grace's, I can't remember what the name of it is, but it's quite famous. She went through that book, and that's how she opted to get sober. And I remember at the time being really surprised by that, because I only knew one way of managing an alcohol problem, and that was through the way that you did it, which was AA.
Complete abstinence.
Yeah. And because it worked so well for Maz, I just never thought to question it or to wonder if there were other ways to do this. But then Lana introduced this to us, and Lana has also chosen to go completely abstinent. But then we talked to some people who were just moderating their alcohol consumption. So can you talk about, from your perspective, again, which is limited because you've been through treatment once and it worked, but can you talk about sort of the differences as you understand them between absolute alcohol will never pass my lips again, and I used to drink a 6-pack a night. Now I have 1 beer on the weekends and it's fine, or however people manage it.
The AA model is that you have to admit that you're powerless over alcohol, and that does, I don't know if it works. It definitely works short time. It'll definitely get someone through a treatment center, but if it works full time or long term, I should say, or not, there's no real data to it, because a lot of AA meetings are actually closed meetings and they're anonymous. So there's no one collecting data. What I do know is that the first year is the toughest one. When you get your first year chip, you're still in the balance of whether or not you're going to start drinking again. And they do say it's about 5 years where your chances of a lapse or a relapse really come down.
We heard Allison Harden say that 2 weeks ago, also a recovery coach.
Which for me cements again the idea of this being a disease, and it is because if you think about cancer or any chronic disease that you have flare-ups with, if you've got any lifestyle in you that makes you susceptible to these things. After the 5-year mark, you're incredibly likely not to have a reoccurrence of anything. People who are cancer-free for 5 years statistically have the same chance of developing a cancer than anyone who's never had cancer before. And it seems to be, with the information they have, the same with alcohol abuse. But unfortunately, the AA model of alcohol management doesn't work for everyone. I think the best treatment centers in the country have about anywhere between a 10 and 15% success rate for long-term sobriety.
Which goes back to another guest of ours point, Joanna Conti, who's been trying to track actual success rates of rehab centers, because for heaven's sakes, 10%, that's terrible odds. I mean, if you went to the doctor and they said, well, you have a 10% chance of survival, or you got to an airport and they said, well, you have a 10% chance of landing where you want to go, who would take on those odds? So I think it's a terrible, terrible number, which maybe speculation, maybe some of why it doesn't get talked about. Because if you knew going in that one in a group of 10 was likely to remain sober, that's pretty challenging.
Now, I personally would tell everyone I'm an alcoholic enjoying sobriety, but that label alcoholic actually dooms some people's mindsets to them having a label that's labeled them a failure. And there is a lot of stigma to it. You know, people say once an addict, always an addict. You know, you can't trust an addict. Addicts lie. Yes, addicts lie. It's part of the disease. But once you've managed your disease, one of the things you don't do is lie, because not having a lie is so empowering and full of freedom that you don't do it. Often.
I mean, I'm not implying you do, but I think we can't say nobody who's recovering.
I can't explain actually the sheer joy of someone asking me a question and me simply being like, yeah, you know what? Here's my honest truth. And it's quite liberating to say, yeah, there you go.
So my mother says, I personally really like hearing about a program that celebrates any success in any form and keeps cheering you on. I mean, that seems to me to be a model that would work well. I think what really struck me when we had lunch with Adi and Alex in September was this mindset of, if somebody took a test and got a 95 out of 100, you wouldn't say to them, you go back to the beginning. That's as good as a failure. Yeah. Who cares? If you can't get 100%, nothing else matters.
This really did blow your mind.
It really did, because you might remember that we had a conversation about kombucha because we had been introduced to it by some friends. I bought some. I was drinking it one day, and it said something to the effect of
fermented beverage.
Fermented beverage should not be consumed by women. May contain traces of alcohol. And I broke out into a complete sweat, because this was probably 3.5 years into Maz's sobriety. And I thought, how in the world am I going to tell him that he's had alcohol? Because I knew that what he would do, based on what I understand from his telling of Alcoholics Anonymous, is he would go back to his group and he would say, I have to start over with a 24-hour chip. Well, I'm here to tell you my perspective. Only my perspective. I think that's garbage. Absolute garbage. If it works for you, great. Don't hear me judging you if it works for you. I do not want Maz to test alcohol to see if he can drink.
Yeah,
my desire to have him share a glass of wine with me is not greater than my appreciation for his sobriety. But nor do I think if he accidentally got served a real beer instead of a non-alcoholic beer, or if something happened, we were somewhere and he accidentally took a drink of real alcohol, recognized it and put it down. I do not believe that that is the same as, well, I had a drink, so I drank a bottle of whiskey, I'm right back at it. That is not the same. A 95 out of 100 is still an A.
That's exactly what Dee's point was, and we started. We're 2 days into the training to be
Rehab counselors.
Rehab counselors.
Not the same as clinicians.
We're not a clinician.
No.
This is just a group.
Online group meetings,
yes,
and individual meetings.
But it's been incredibly mind opening for me, because it is that point. Yes, I haven't had a drink in over 5 years, and I'm very proud of that. But I'm not everyone. If someone has, and this is basically the example Adi used, is someone's coming to you, they're drinking 3 bottles of wine every other day, or say 2 bottles of wine during the course of a normal night. If they can get that down to first day a bottle, that's a 50% reduction, and then maybe get it down to I can enjoy a glass of wine every night. Yes, you're not abstinent, you're still consuming alcohol, but that is a hell of a reduction, and the health benefits for that can't be ignored.
Yeah, I mean, if you can go from 2 bottles to 1.5 bottles, you're moving in the right direction. We don't say to someone who has to lose 50 pounds, until you lose the 50 pounds, what you lose is irrelevant.
Yeah.
Lose 10 pounds and it's better for your health. Lose 5 pounds, it's better for your health. Walk to the end of the driveway. That's better than doing nothing. Because I'd never thought about it, I just can never go back to feeling like the only way to say that you have conquered your alcohol problem is to never have it again. I can't go back to that.
Now, I don't know if anyone who goes to, say, an AA group with me would agree with this, but we do live in a place where you are entitled to your own opinion, and
for now,
I think this is a fantastic alternative. I think it's powerful. I mean, Adi asked me off the record what I thought, and I told him, well, my adage is you should always keep an open mind, but not so open your mind falls out, or your brain falls out. This is a system that works, and it's
for a lot of people.
For a lot of people, there isn't one way to learn. Students ask me all the time, "What's the best way to study?" Well, that really does depend on you.
Yeah.
What's the best way to manage my alcohol consumption? That actually does depend on you.
And what the people around you are comfortable with, and all the other really complex components that go with something like this.
There was a reason I was put into a coma because I went into alcohol withdrawal when I was actually in a hospital. So I was kind of lucky there. Is that stopping alcohol cold, if you consume a large amount of alcohol on a daily basis, can actually kill you.
Yeah, it's clearly very dangerous. If that had happened at home, I've said this many times, I think Maz would have killed me. And this is a truly, truly nonviolent human being. At his lowest point of drinking, he never even raised a hand to me, much less touched me violently. And he was not one of us. I believe could very easily have died that night. That is nothing to mess around with. If you have a serious alcohol problem, never, ever, ever, in my one-person study opinion, and based on conversations we've had with other people, never decide it's all or nothing without a lot of medical assistance, because you just cannot anticipate where your mind will take you.
So here's an example, and hopefully you won't think this is a silly example, but there's a world of difference in thinking the answer to. Yes, we successfully finished off our hardwood floors by watching a YouTube video and getting advice from one person. That's different than how to deal with someone who is an alcoholic and you want them to stop drinking.
Yeah, boy, that's a scary place to be.
So this reinvent program, I think, is absolutely fantastic. I'm hopefully going to be involved in it, and my hat off to Adi and for setting it up.
So here's the link if you want to go and look it up yourself. Be prepared. There's a little bit of some crusty language, because Adi's point is that shame is, and we've heard this from a lot of people, shame is what keeps many people from seeking help, asking for help, reaching out, keeps partners and children and parents from saying, we need help inside our house, because the shame is so debilitating. So he has sort of an F shame approach.
And it's not F with asterisks. It's just F, the letter F.
That's on the website. It is not.
Well,
it's the full spelling.
But it is. But if you look at the join this meeting, it's just capital F space shame, and that's what it is, dealing with the fact that there is no shame to suffering from a disease.
Yeah. So if you are struggling, this might be a place for you to start. There's a free component to it. And then there's also paid components. But we just feel really lucky to have gotten started on this journey. Boy, if someone had said to us 18 months ago, hey, you think you have any interest in maybe leading groups of family members of people who are trying to manage their alcohol better, or people trying to manage it? I think we both would have said, I don't think so.
Another thing I should point out is Adi is actually qualified to do this. His PhD is in psychology.
Yes.
Unlike the plant biochemist over here.
Actor, writer, English professor. So yes. Again, we're not saying we're clinicians. This is a different model that is just an open-ended space to join, whether you choose to be sober or not. The other thing I love about it is you can choose to be sober and be part of the group. Abstinence is a piece of that continuum. Mothers continues. I think this training is going to be your breakthrough. I sure hope so. You have so much to offer so many. Thanks, Mother. All right. I'm off to a conference later today and have to be leading a meeting at 8:30 on Thursday. So we are not going to do a guest Thursday conversation, but we'll be back next Tuesday to talk about who knows what. We'll know then. Have a great day and rest of your week. And let me get to the end. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good one.